Then on Sports Central, we go for our next team prediction of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Kansas Jayhawks, a team that went 6-7 overall in the 2022 season. This team went to a bowl game last season, and it was the first time this team has done so since 2008. It has been a while since Kansas has been relevant in college football, but this is a team looking forward to 2023 that has got some really good momentum right now. This is a very exciting team to look forward to, and we'll be talking about them here today, analyzing this team and predict their schedule game by game in this video. Let's get started with a quick recap of 2022. Once again, the record was 6-7. Good season for this team. I mean, I know 6-7 for most teams is a very mediocre record, but for Kansas, it is absolutely a step in the right direction. This team was 5-0 to start out the season. They were undefeated heading into the TCU matchup, which, I mean, it's still insane to think about how both teams were undefeated heading into that matchup. I mean, both TCU and Kansas had very low expectations heading into 2022. TCU eventually went to the national championship, truly one of the big surprise teams of all time. And I mean, both teams being undefeated heading into that matchup in pretty much mid-October, they're just insane to think about. TCU did win it by a touchdown, but I don't think anyone saw that being eventually one of the biggest games of the Big 12 in 2022. But I mean, you consider the 5-0 start for Kansas. They beat Tennessee Tech 56-10, beat West Virginia on the road 55-42, beat Houston on the road 48-30. Houston, a decent team. And Kansas went in there, got a really nice win, beat Duke 35-27. Turns out Duke was also a surprise team last year. They were a solid team, so that was a nice win. Beat Iowa State by a field goal, so overall, not too bad. And then the loss to TCU, then lost to Oklahoma by 10, lost to Baylor then 35-23. So kind of a little skid there in the middle of the season heading into the bye. Came back, beat Oklahoma State 37-16, a dominant win there for Kansas. And that's what got him up to bowl eligibility. And then lost the last three games to Texas Tech, Texas, and then Kansas State, three of the best teams in the Big 12 last year. So kind of a bumpy down the stretch for this team. They also lost in the Liberty Bowl to Arkansas 55-53. That was an insane game there. Went into triple overtime. Kansas very well could have won that game, but Arkansas snuck by in triple overtime there. So an insane season for Kansas, to say the least. Yeah, it was bumpy down the stretch with those losses, but I mean, this team got to 6-7, and this team is on the rise looking forward to 2023. And let's look at your roster preview now. There is a lot of optimism that this team can have looking forward to 2023. I mean, this team is returning most of their key players, which is insane to think about. Jalen Daniels coming back, who really was a big standout in 2022. Turns out he could be one of the best, if not the best, quarterback in the Big 12 this season. It's insane to think about. Kansas, of all teams, could have the best quarterback in the conference this season. I mean, Jalen Daniels was overall great. 2,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, 4 picks, 66% completion rate. He was injured for a good chunk of the season, in which case Jason Bean took over, which he was decent when he played. It wasn't a huge drop-off. So the quarterback situation was overall not too bad for Kansas. That's been an issue just year after year for this team, is offensively being able to do literally nothing. But Devin Neal in the backfield also was excellent. 1,200 yards, 10 touchdowns last year. I mean, Jalen Daniels also rushed for over 400 yards, 7 touchdowns. You can't forget about that. He is a very talented player. Daniel Hishaw Jr. is also coming back. The receiving core, Lawrence Arnold, Luke Grimm, Quentin Skinner's coming back as well. Your top 3 wideouts, and your fourth in receiving from last season, your top tight end, Mason Fairchild, also coming back. So the receiving core, everything about this offense is looking excellent. As we look forward to 2023, experience-wise, this team is looking good. You lose 2 on the offensive line. Now, defensively, you do lose 4 on the D-line. That's probably my main concern for this team. There's going to be a lack of depth and some inexperience there on the D-line for sure, and even with the linebacking situation. But the defensive secondary, this is one of the only times where there aren't any notable losses out of the defensive secondary. That is definitely a huge thing for Kansas, being able to return all those key players. And so defensively, against the pass, they should be pretty good. They should be improved. And offensively, there's a lot of potential here. So it's wild talking about Kansas like this, because you really are rarely able to talk about Kansas with any expectations in football. This is just not a football school. But I mean, this is a team that is very much on the rise right now, and a lot of potential here. They ended 13-year bowl drought in 2022, so obviously they finally have gotten over that hump, and Could this team potentially be a Big 12 contender in 2023? I mean, that's a question that needs to be asked at this point. I mean, the Big 12 is wide open. I think your Big 3 in the Big 12 are definitely Kansas State, Texas, and probably Oklahoma as well. I mean, and Texas Tech is up there as well, but Kansas is not far behind. This team is very much, I don't think they're going to win the conference, but I think this team could make some noise and be a contender and definitely be improved versus how they were in 2022. Your transfer portal and recruiting now, not too many significant moves. You do bring in a few key players here. Dylan McDuffie's coming in from Georgia Tech. Ethan Vasco, quarterback, is off to Coastal Carolina. Kai Thomas, running back, is off to Kent State. Offensive tackle Logan Brown is coming in from Wisconsin. You also got Spencer Lavelle coming in from Cal. So you're adding a couple of key players there for the offensive line. And then Gage Keys is coming in from Minnesota. Yeah, you can expect him to be a starter on the D-line. So that's definitely a really good thing. This team was able to add Keys and then Devin Phillips, both of which are expected to be starters in 2023. And then Eric Gilliard, linebackers, off to UConn. So definitely a good thing to add some depth to the defensive line. And otherwise, I mean, this team is very much in a good position. I'm really not too concerned about any particular area. Recruiting-wise, definitely not great. 73rd in the country, 13th in the Big 12, so second to last. No 4 stars. You got 14 3-stars coming in. That's all that makes of the 2023 class for this team. So obviously Kansas football, not a very big recruiting school, but I mean, the way this team is built, this is as good of a chance as Kansas has to be a true contender in football, and I'd say in the near future. So I've got this team at a 7 out of 10 on the future forecast meet. I do think, though, you consider how this team did surprise last season. They were expected to be kind of right around their same 2 to 3 wins, but Lance Leipold and the way he was able to develop players and get them up to 6 wins, I mean, I guess you can say you can't count this team out because they were able to defy the odds there. So I do think this team has got a great future. I do think Kansas is definitely a team with potential as long as Lance Leipold can hang around. I mean, he proved last season that this team can be a good team. So there's a lot of potential here for this team despite the recruiting not being quite at a high level. But with that, it's time to take a look at the schedule now. So you got Missouri State week 1, Illinois week 2. Both games are on Friday nights and both games are at home. So obviously starting the season on 2 Friday games, definitely interesting. Then you got Nevada on the road, and then BYU at home, Texas on the road, UCF at home, and then Oklahoma State on the road. Then you got your bye week. Oklahoma comes to town, then off to Iowa State. You got Texas Tech and Kansas State both at home, and then Cincinnati on the road to finish out the regular season. So you're playing 3 of the 4 Big 12 newcomers in Cincinnati on the road, and then UCF and BYU. You don't play Houston, but you did play them last season, obviously before they were in the Big 12. So, I mean, Illinois, though, I will say this. Illinois next season, you can expect them between 7 and 9 wins. They should still be a solid team. Defensively, a lot of talent there. Offensively, Illinois might struggle, but it's the defense that's going to be the strong side for them. But looking at your first 4 matchups, Missouri State, you should take care of them, no problem. FCS team, I do think you win that one pretty easily. And then Illinois at home after that. I think you get a really nice win here in week 2 on that Friday night against Illinois. I mean, once again, I see them being a solid team once again. I mean, they were good last year. They really were a solid team, especially on defense. So, I mean, if you can score some points, I do think Illinois' offense, especially at the beginning of the season, is going to be atrocious. They're not going to be a good offense at all. So if you can hold them, which defensively Kansas, I think, can do that, and this offense is good enough to score some points, you should win that game, and I do think you do. So a nice win there in week 2. You beat Nevada on the road. You come back, you play a decent BYU team, you beat them as well. So I've got Kansas off to a 4-0 start, similar to what we saw in 2022, where this team really was solid at the start of the season. So that should rank you, I do think, in the top 20 heading into that Texas matchup on the road. That could turn out to be a huge game there in Austin, but I do think you lose to Texas. I think they're definitely one of the best teams in the conference. I wouldn't be surprised if Texas won the Big 12 next season or this season, obviously before taking off to the SEC. And then UCF, I've said this a few times, if any of the 4 newcomers could be a contender this season in the Big 12, it is UCF. And I do think it's nice having UCF coming to your place, but I do think you dropped this one in a close one. Oklahoma State on the road, you handled them last season. You'd do it again this year in Stillwater. Definitely a nice win there as well. And then Oklahoma at home, I do think you dropped this one. It's been so long since Kansas has beaten Oklahoma, and they've put up a fight the last couple of seasons. I still remember when it was in Lawrence a couple of years ago, Oklahoma considered a big national contender, and Kansas was that close to pulling off what would have been an insane upset there. And it's very much a possibility. We could see that in 2023, but I do think the Sooners are improved, and Kansas does lose that one. So you're still 5-3 heading into November. All you need is one win to get back to a bowl game, and I think you get two. You lose to Iowa State on the road. This is a very winnable matchup here. Iowa State, I think, is one of the worst teams in the conference. But I do think you drop that one in a close one. Kind of a disappointing loss there, and it'd be a good one for Iowa State. And then Texas Tech at home. Texas Tech is a much more talented team than Iowa State, but I think coming back, you got them at home, and Texas Tech, this is a crucial game here, and Texas Tech could be a really solid team next year as well. So I think you get a really nice win here, and you beat the Red Raiders, and that gets you up to your 6th win and to bowl eligibility. Then you got Kansas State home after that, which I think you put up a fight against Kansas State. This could be a close one. Maybe you get a huge win against them, which is a possibility, but I do think you drop that one. And then Cincinnati on the road. I think Cincinnati's a team that, joining the Big 12, this is a tough time for them to do it. I do think that the Bearcats are in a tough situation right now. No more Luke Fickell. He's off to Wisconsin, and Cincinnati is absolutely in a rebuild phase right now. Very inexperienced team. I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the conference, which is insane to think about. Just a couple of years ago, they were in the college football playoff, and it's going to be far from that in 2023. So I think you go to Cincinnati, and you get a really nice road win to bring you up to 7-5 next season. I got 7 wins predicted for Kansas, and I'll say this as well. The potential for this team is much higher. I think this team has got a 10-2 ceiling. That's the best record this team could have. 10 wins is within the question, I think, for this team. I mean, you can't count them out, I really do think, and there's a lot of upside on this team. I've got the floor at 4-8. So this is as wide of a range as I give a team, just because, of course, Kansas, you can't forget, this is usually a bottom feeder in the Big 12. So I do have 4-8 for the floor, 10-2 for the ceiling. I've got this team right in the middle at 7-5, but I mean, there are enough winnable games here. I mean, if you win these 7 games, plus you beat Iowa State, which is very winnable, and you get a big home win against like UCF or Oklahoma or even Kansas State, that already brings you up to 9 wins. So it is very much within reason for this team to be a big contender in 2023. Definitely an exciting season coming up, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below on this team, and I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.